Carl, how's it going?
Hey, how are you, Rashid?
So, Carl, listen, here they are again, edit. There's a report coming out now. We know that China is pushing the bricks, the Belt and Road, and all of this stuff. And here's a report that just came out today. The article is this: fears of new global pandemic soar as new mutant strain of virus discovered in China. Gotta
Are we
speak on
back
that,
in
man.
2020? I mean, this is yeah. This is at the time when there's talking United States are going to reimpose mask
Mhm,
rules because
mhm,
for fear of another COVID surge. It's like anytime they're talking about China, they're really talking about United States, right? It's like
mhm,
100% projection. When they're talking about Chinese economy slowing down, what they're doing, they're distracting view from the domestic economy in United States. Everyone knows there's high inflation, economy not doing so good, but don't worry about that, guys. Let's focus on China. China is not doing so well, so hot right now. Look at the youth unemployment numbers in China. You better wish you're not there, you're here. You are lucky. You're
mhm.
lucky to be here in the great United States. But they have been doing that for ages. I just saw another ridiculous article from Bloomberg today. It says, China is adding renewable energy too fast. It's adding too fast that its power grid couldn't handle it. It's like, of course, because they're actually adding new capacity.
Mhm.
That just means they're going to expand their power grid later to handle the new power coming online. Whereas in United States, we don't have to worry about that issue because guess what? We don't add new power capacity. We'll just let people in Texas freeze their ass off once in a while. When there's a weather condition or storm or something. So we live in bizarro world, and now the mainstream media are all they're taking audience job, right? They're taking the audience job. There's no everything is satire now. Like a lot of times, if I saw something a news clipping, I have to wonder, okay, is this real satire or is this real
Right,
news? And a lot
right.
of times when I Google it, it's real. It's pretty incredible
It's
time we live in.
it's shameful. Because even the UN stated that the one positive for the global economy was China's growth. China became the economic engine of the world, and it was the only country to post positive gains in the midst of this so-called virus thing that has been going on for the last 3 years. So how in the world, on one hand, can China ascend to the economic engine, the center of the global economy, and post the only gains economically, and yet their economy is falling apart and America is rebounding? How? I
And
mean,
and when they're talking about Chinese economy slowdown, we're talking about they're going from like growth rate of like six or like 8 or 10% to maybe
mhm,
like 5 or 4
mhm.
percent. Look at what the growth percentage of United States economy. US will wish it has 4% growth. Like everybody will be like, hallelujah, we're in the Goldilocks economy right now. We're growing with 4%. Things are going great. I mean, they can only wish for that kind of growth rate in the Western countries. Um, but sorry for going on ranting. Go ahead, Rashid.
Hey, you always welcome to rant. Hey, that's when we get the best material, when you go, when you just, and I mean, we get the best material, the most in-depth material. That's why I allow, when I have people on the show, I just allow them to be free, because most pundits, most hosts, they cut them off right at the time when they're about to share the most pertinent information. And I get sick of that, watching shows, and I'm like, this guy's rolling, he's rolling. Then they'll cut him off and go to something else. And you're like, are you not interested in what he was about to say? So yeah, but there was something that we talked about that you wanted to talk about. Share it with the people, and let's address it, and let's go into it.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Huawei because this is the biggest story in China right now.
Mhm.
And this happened in conjunction with the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, visiting China. she was on record of saying we need to limit China's technological advances. She was pressuring all the so-called U.S. allies, but really client states, to fall in line with the U.S. policy of carrying out the advanced semiconductor restriction to China. And when she was in China, she actually said, we will not budge from our national, quote unquote, national security issues, which means all this advanced semiconductor restriction will stay in place. But she's like, but we can still do business. There's other less sophisticated American goods that we like to sell to you. And she was literally filmed hawking American cosmetic goods in Beijing. So it's like, okay, you can have the cosmetics. Like, you can take some American cosmetics, but you're not getting our semiconductors. I'm sorry. So right to time with her visit in Beijing with her rhetoric, Huawei released their new flagship phone, Mate. I don't know if it's called Mate or Mate 60 Pro. So this is quite a big breaking news, because the U.S. has their eyes on Huawei for a long time. I mean, Huawei, for people who are not familiar, Huawei got their start basically reverse engineer Cisco routers, and they were able to sell their product much cheaper than Cisco, so they gain a lot of market in the global south. But that issue has been settled because Cisco did take Huawei to court. That issue was settled back in 2000. But what really alarmed United States was not the original sin of copying Cisco. What really alarmed United States is Huawei is building all these telecom infrastructure in the global South countries. I'm right now talking to you from Bali, Indonesia. Here, I'm talking on a Huawei built 4G network. That's one thing that China has done is, like in Bali, for example, everybody have a smartphone. Even like little teenage girls have a smartphone because Chinese companies made it cheaper for people in the global South to afford smartphones. They made everything cheap and affordable. So like people in Southeast Asia, people in Africa, in South Asia, West Asia, everybody can afford a smartphone, and they can get on the Huawei built 4G network to communicate with their friends. This is where Huawei get in trouble because U.S. accused Huawei of busting the Iran sanction when Huawei built out the telecom network in Iran. And this is why they had their proxy in Canada to arrest the daughter of Huawei founder, who is also the Huawei CFO, Meng Wanzhou. She's a daughter of the Huawei founder, and she's the CFO. And she was arrested, put under house arrest, and she was made to wear an ankle bracelet the whole time she was in Canada. I mean, just imagine if China does that to a Western CEO. Can you imagine if China arrests Elon Musk and make him wear an ankle bracelet? People will be calling for war in the United States. But this is what U.S. did. This is what U.S. and Canada did. But what really alarmed the United States is because Huawei rolled out their 5G. So now they are getting ahead. Huawei own a lot of patents on the 5G technology. Right. And that's when United States realized, oh, whoa, wait a minute. This is when some average Joe will say, oh, China, they steal everything from us. They stole 5G, so we don't have 5G in the United States anymore because Huawei stole it, right? So what really alarmed the United States is because as the 5G is getting rolled out across the world, Huawei is getting a lot of contract. They're getting contract to build out 5G network in Britain, in Germany, in Australia. And this is why the U.S. intelligence community get alarmed, because the three-letter agencies, they have a back door to all these telecom providers. This is how U.S. can, they can tap German Chancellor Angela Merkel, right? Like, because they have their back door everywhere. But if Huawei is allowed to build these telecom networks in Britain, in Germany, in Australia, they're not going to get that back door anymore. That's not acceptable. It's like, so suddenly they say, oh, this is a national security issue, because for sure Chinese government is going to get a backdoor to Huawei, and then they're going to listen to all our friends and allies. So you have to stop what you're doing. You like, they tell Britain, like, you don't know what you're doing. Like, we know better than your national interest. We're telling you this is very dangerous. So it's actually forced countries like Britain to cancel their 5G contract with Huawei. And then they came out, try to kill Huawei, because Huawei is the flagship tech company in China. They are on the bleeding edge of the technology. One of the things is Huawei require, because in the technology sector is a very diverse global supply chain. Back in the days when US is talking up the spirits of the merits of free market, right? You're supposed to work according to that comparative advantage. You work on what's best, what you can produce more efficiently. So the global supply chain across the tech is very diverse. Like for example, the Huawei, a lot of the Huawei equipment contained a lot of the American, South Korean, Japanese technology at the time. They source, for example, their chipset from Qualcomm. Initially they would still have Qualcomm design their 5G chips, and then that design will be sent over to Taiwan to be actually manufactured by TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductors. Now, the Taiwan, actually, they also require other external foreign technology. Taiwan Semiconductor, to make their chip, they get the machine called the EUV machine, the extreme ultraviolet lithography machine, that's produced by a Dutch company, ASML, in Netherlands. The machine basically use lasers to etch like very tiny transistors on these. Like right now we're talking about like Apple phone is going to use like 5 nanometers, 3 nanometer chips. It's not visible to naked eye, so they have very sophisticated machines to make them. Like I think one of those EUV machines from ASML cost like $14 million, just one unit of the machine. So United States look at this global supply chain. They realize the semiconductor is the weakest link in the China the China tech tree. So this is a choke point where we can choke off the Chinese tech growth. And so they first banned Qualcomm from selling their chips to China. And then they went one step further. They said any company in the world that uses a U.S. technology, any kind of U.S. technology, whether software, hardware, then you are not allowed to do business with China, or you're not allowed to sell to Huawei. So all these companies, whether TSMC in Taiwan or the ASML in the Netherlands or the Japanese companies, South Korean company, they all require a little piece of U.S. technology somewhere. So that prevents them. This is basically U.S. it is placing a global ban on Huawei. So you can't do so. Huawei cannot get Qualcomm chips from U.S. Huawei, they designed their own chip, the Kirin chip, to replace the Qualcomm chip. But even after they design it, they still cannot send it over to Taiwan to have it manufactured, because U.S. say that's a no-no anymore. So Huawei tried to buy machine from the Dutch company ASML to make the chip themselves, and that's what U.S. tell Netherlands, no, you cannot sell your machine to China anymore. So it's like a very harsh, very strict ban and it was designed to hold China back for generations. That there's an article in New York Times recently. They basically said this is a war. This is an economic war they're waging on China. And in some effect, it did work, because it killed off the Huawei cell phone business.
Yeah.
So the official reason for United States against Huawei is so-called national security. If you listen to Biden, he will say, "Oh, we are preventing China to use this U.S. technology to build missiles and nuclear weapon against us, which is completely bogus because to the chip that goes into the missiles, they don't require 7 nanometers, 5 nanometer chip because you need the 7 nanometer refer to the size. It's very small. You need very small chips to fit on your phone, right? On missile there's no restriction on size. Right now, like 28 nanometer a chip which China can produce themselves will just do fine on the ICBMs. And in fact, all the big missiles, they actually, it can't be too fine, to be too fragile. They have to be hardened against radiation. So there's a different requirement for the military hardware. So China has no problem making semiconductors for their missiles and nuclear weapons. And this really, this whole ban is driven by, there's one is U.S. just want to stop China from progressing, but there's a former CEO, Eric Schmidt. He has contract with Pentagon with his own AI startup companies because his idea is AI is going to be the future. AI is going to be able to use AI to fight wars, but we have to stop China because we need to stop China from producing the Skynet before we do. So Eric Schmidt is a big proponent of this tech war on China. But also his AI company is getting all these fat contracts from Pentagon, at the same time. And so it's all grift, man. And then for AI, for training AI, for example, the GPT that everyone is familiar with, they do need the most advanced, fastest chip, and they require a lot of it, include basically they use a NVIDIA's chip, GPU, to train like large models, and this is why US also banned NVIDIA sale to China. So really, it's the focus is on AI, but they also focus on killing Huawei. So Huawei, they're branch everywhere. They're continue to build out telecom network like 5G towers, because the 5G tower require like I said, you don't need 7 nanometer chip for a 5G tower. The 28 nanometer chip will just do just fine. But that did kill off their handset business because because also right now in cell phone you only have two platforms essentially. You have only Apple, you Apple on the Apple OS, or you're on Android, which is owned by Google. And the US made Google to kick off to withdraw the Android support for Huawei. So Huawei developed their own OS system called the Harmony OS, right? So Huawei basically had to build everything from scratch themselves to make sure it's like 100% Chinese made, so to get around the US sanction. And the biggest news recently is that they actually pulled it off. They came out their new phone. It's amazing. I saw a lot of the demo, and it was sold out fast. Like in the 5 days, they sold 1 million units of their new latest flagship phone. It cost maybe like $900, which compared to like the top of the line Samsung and iPhone, it's still very much more affordable, and it's made with 100% Chinese made components. They actually did everybody in China, everybody in United States, as soon as they get their hands on the Mate60 Pro, they start to take it down to go the cover to make sure it's 100% made in China. And now we have the verdict. It's 100% made in China. And how they were able to do it, Huawei already have a lot of the top level infrastructure. They already designed a Harmony OS to get around the Android, and they designed their own keyring chips, so they don't need to rely on Qualcomm anymore. The bottleneck is making small enough semiconductor. That part was solved very recently because so there are two type of machines that ASML, the Dutch company, makes. One is the top of the line EUV, the extreme ultraviolet lithography machine that makes right now the most advanced 3 nanometer and 5 nanometer chips in Taiwan. But they have an older machine called the DUV, which stands for the deep ultraviolet machine. It's not as efficient, but back in 2017, the engineers in TSMC on Taiwan, they figured out a way to use the older DUV machine to make 7 nanometer chips. It's not as efficient as the latest DUV machines, but Huawei has no choice. They don't have access to the DUV machine from Netherlands. But U.S. did not sanction a DUV machine because it's an older technology. So ASML from Netherlands can still export DUV machine to China until January 2024. So Huawei took all this, or not really Huawei, the Chinese semiconductor company called SMIC. They imported a whole lot of SML DUV machine, hoarded them up, and the fact that Huawei is able to roll this off their assembly line and debut their phone, that tells me they're not afraid of U.S. sanction even after 2024, because at the end of the year, China is coming out with their own indigenously designed DUV machine, so they won't need ASML anymore. They won't need the Dutch company anymore. So what U.S. sanction actually did, they killed off all the Western tech companies' business in China. Because ASML after 2024, they're not going to get any other order from China because one is sanctioned by U.S. But even if the U.S. lifts sanctions, the Chinese company have to look. It's like, look, we can get cut off anytime. You are not a reliable suppliers. We have to rely on ourselves. And the semiconductor is so important that it goes into everything. They cannot depend on an unreliable supplier. So for all the Chinese tech companies are now in this together. It's do or die. See, but before the U.S. sanction, China has spent years trying to indigenize their own semiconductor manufacturer through SMIC, but they're always a couple generations behind. One reason is because Huawei. Why do Huawei need to go with local suppliers when they can get it cheaper and more reliable product from TSMC or from Qualcomm, right? So the business always have the business reasons to go with the cheapest, most reliable source. But now the Western companies are not reliable anymore. This is by decree of the United States government. They show that they can cut it off anytime. So now the Chinese company have no choice but to go domestic. And they, the thing is, technology today, the cliche was it's not rocket science, but even rocket science, China already mastered rocket science back in the 1960s. China, people don't realize is that China spent $400 billion plus every year to import chips from overseas. So China spent more money importing chips than importing oil. And what U.S. sanction did is, now that hundreds of billions of dollars, instead of going to pay off Qualcomm, paying off TSMC, or paying off ASML, hundreds of billions of dollars are now poured into research and development in China to make Chinese chips. And that's what happened. And that this is a great success. There's a lot of copium from the Western tech analysts. There's to say, oh yeah, the 7 nanometer chips produced by DUV machine, that's like a couple generations ago. That's like sold 2019. That's 5-year technology. Yeah, but before that, China didn't even have that. China before was 10, 15 years behind, and now they're only 5 years behind. And guess what? 5 years, they will catch up. And where are you going to go? And this is another thing. Right now, we're actually reaching the limit of Moore's law. So the Moore's law says every 6 months, you're going to pack more semiconductor on a piece of silicon. But right now we're getting to 5 nanometers, 3 nanometer territory. I mean, we're approaching the limit of physics here. They are not going to get any smaller unless there's a huge technological breakthrough by using some kind of different material other than silicon. So while the TSMC and all these other companies are facing this challenge of overcoming this next barrier of going under 3 nanometers, China is still steadily catching up, and China is piling billions, tens of billions of dollars, and China have tens of thousands of engineers that graduate each year. They can it's throw shit tons of money and people. You know what? It's just gonna happen. It's just gonna happen. I mean, like, we're just talking about the timeline here. Whether it's gonna happen, 5 years from now, or 7 years from now, it's gonna happen. And once that happens, guess what? China no longer needs United States. If we can pick everything.
But I think that is one of the main things that has the West in an uproar, is because they see China is steadily ascending. And remember that this is a non-Western, non-white nation. And this is a no-no when it comes to the so-called rules-based international order. They laughed at the Chinese endeavor to produce a fifth-generation warplane. And when the U.S. Defense Secretary under Bush and Democrat, too, as he went to visit Beijing, the Chinese flew their first fifth-generation warplane overhead, which startled and stunned the United States. The Chinese build their own passenger planes now. Now, for a minute, let's just pretend that China was to do to the U.S. and the West what the West and the U.S. are trying to do to China. What if China sanctions Europe? What if China cuts off trade? Or what if China sanctions the United States and stops shipping goods here? Remember that 93 to 95% of all goods on all the shelves in the stores in America are Chinese made. So what if China just so happened to say, you know what? I'm so tired of the United States using national security as a disguise for something more evil. And I'm tired of them always ragging on us and trying to stop our growth. What if China decides to say, you know what? Instead, I got it. Stop shipping all of those goods to the United States. How do you think that they would feel? But when you are in this mind of exceptionalism, the rules apply to everybody else but you. And that is the problem with America and the Western world. And I see Carl in the booth, and I'm going to bring him back in. Hopefully, there you go.
I need 5G right now so bad. It's very unfortunate because I live in the middle of the jungle, so I don't get fiber optics, and like my access to internet depend on the weather, and right now it looks like it's gonna rain. So when I was getting going, my internet conked out. I have to reset my modem, and so I heard a little bit of your monologue. That was great. That was great. This is also why Huawei units were sold out, because the Chinese people, they understand what this means. What Huawei was put under by the US sanctions. So they're buying Huawei partly because Huawei is a great phone, a great product, but also because of patriotism. They are buying Huawei because we prefer Huawei than phone made with US components right now. And this just shows that ultimately the U.S. sanction against China will be futile, and you'll come back and bite them in the ass too, because a lot of the U.S. tech companies are already crying. It's like, what are you doing to us? You're killing our China business. Now we're not going to get any business in China because the Chinese company not going to trust us as their suppliers. They cannot have to have their vital component parts to be liable to be choked off anytime just by a stupid decree from the White House, and that's gonna happen. That's gonna U.S. wanted full spectrum dominance but what they're going to end up with full Chinese spectrum dominance in tech after this is over, because once people still have this, they have some hubris. They think, oh, Chinese cannot innovate, like Chinese, yes they can, I mean, look, I when I came to United States in 1990, my dad came here as an exchange student in 1985. So he was in 1990. He was working as a postdoc in University of Illinois in Chicago. So when I visit my dad's research lab, it's all Chinese people working there. It's all like so. I know how much the U.S. research institutions rely on the Chinese labor, and right now, U.S. is shooting itself in the foot by coming out with the so-called China Initiative, which they recently scrapped, but still goes on. The FBI goes on witch hunt to try to find spies, and they always target the ethnic Chinese scientists and researchers. That's forcing a lot of the Chinese researchers and scientists going back to China right now, because they don't feel secure, no longer feel secure in the United States. Before, they may be complacent, they have a good life here, and now that's no longer an option, and that in turn is aiding the development in China. Like, one of the US sanctions is against US citizens who work in those high-tech Chinese industries. So a lot of these, Chinese American top-level engineers, they just, okay, well, I'll just give up my American citizenship. I'm Chinese now. I'm just Chinese. If you're going to take away my job, I can always change my nationality. And so this is what's happening. This is so stupid, because there's no reason that U.S. and China couldn't cooperate and have a much more fruitful a relationship. China is not the one that's starting this tech war. It's the U.S. that's want to keep China down. That's leading to this. And thankfully, I think this will all end in tears for the U.S. elite.
There can be you have to understand something. In the people who run America's mind, there cannot be an equal relationship, especially an equal relationship with a non-Western, non-white nation. How dare you think that you're on my level? How dare you believe that that you are entitled to have independent thought, independent views, independent policies? That is unacceptable to colonialism and the nations that have push colonialism around the globe. Like, I was thinking, think about this. They are sanctioning China with a market of 1.4 billion people. Think about the revenue that these Western companies could make because China is modernizing. It has moved 850 million people from poverty into the middle class. That in itself is the size of the Western world's population. So now you have a market that you can benefit off of economically, but you're so headstrong in this hubris and in this arrogance that I have to dominate and dictate, that you're shooting not only yourself in the foot, but you're shooting yourself in the arm, the leg, the neck, and the eye to try to keep dominance. You are,
and the balls, and they're shooting themselves in the balls, and then $400 billion market. That's how much China was spending to import semiconductor chips. And they just say, "Oh yeah, we don't want that. We rather give up on all that money rather than you get ahead in technology." I mean, this is insane. This is why a lot of the U.S. companies right now, they're crying uncle. They're saying, what the hell are these people in White House thinking? They have no idea what the hell they're doing, and they're screwing us. They're screwing us because these tech companies, they require a lot of capital investment into research. And then so sometimes their margins, to give up on such a big market as China, they say, oh no, that's only 25% of their export market. No, that's 25%. That 25% of their market share could just be their margin, their profit. You are just wiping out their whole profit right now, and you're gonna make them like barely subsistence level, barely to scrape by, and that's what they don't understand. Now before is essentially all this Chinese money importing American components are going to fund American research and development. Now that $400 billion that China used to import the chips, now they're spending on their own domestic research and development. And you know, then we're seeing, this is what we're seeing right now. The result is coming out. And you know, they won't like it, but it's too bad. They will have to live with it.
And what's crazy is they're not just doing it to Russia. I mean, China, they're doing it to Russia, Iran, the BRICS nations, and the entire population of the planet Earth. And they're not stopping to think, hey, it hadn't worked here. It doesn't work over here. It hadn't worked over here. So why should I try it on the largest economy, purchasing power parity, with the Chinese? Why should I do it with Russia when Russia has all of these natural minerals and resources and farm equipment and farm aid that it gives out to the world? Why are these people insane? That's
if it doesn't work, just do more, right? If it didn't work last,
it's crazy, man. I mean, I guess because it seems like, as I often say, are there any adults in Washington? Because it seems like common sense would prevail, but it seems like these people don't have common sense. And while they're claiming to promote and protect the United States national security, they are putting it in the worst position ever by the policies that they continue to enact.